one of the benefits of using Houdini is its procedural workflow. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. We're going to set up our points at the sub level, our source points for our flip particles in a very procedural way. So later, let's say if you're working in a shot and you're 2 weeks into the shot and you have gotten pretty good results and everything, but upstream something changes in the layout department. Let's say this cliff geometry moves around a bit. Now, if you went ahead and set everything up procedurally from the get-go, you wouldn't really have to do many changes when you get the new layout geometry. All you would have to do is just update the geometry to its latest asset version and you're good to go. Everything would follow and everything would just work automatically. So let's take a look of an example, and I'm going to drop down a geometry sub and I'm going to rename this, let's say FX, because this is the node where majority of our effects would be in. And I'm going to go inside and I'm going to drop down an ocean source node. Okay, and I'm going to say hide other objects so I don't see my cliff and my ship geometry. Okay, so as soon as I drop the ocean source node, you can see that there is an empty blue box sitting at the origin. And I don't want that. I want a container full of points in it. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to initialize from wave tank to flat tank. And that's going to give me these points here. And obviously if I change the size in X and Z and even the center, you can see like it goes up and down, it would change automatically. Now, if I come to top view, you can see, so I'm going to decrease the particle separation. So the bigger this number, the lower the number of points you would have in this container. So as you can see, there is two lines here, one box here and then the one box on the outside. And that has to do with the boundary layer. Now, boundary layer is kind of a safe space that sometimes you use and sometimes you don't. It depends. It highly depends on the shot you're working. So what you can do for this example, I'm just going to go to the boundary layer tab and switch that off, and that's gone now. And what else? Narrowband, we're going to take a look about narrowbanding in the next video, where we would optimize our simulations or our source with narrowband. And velocity, boundary layer, surface evaluation, flat. I'm going to leave everything else to default. Now let's talk about on how we can set this up procedurally. So if I go back to my object level, you can see that my container is sitting inside this cliff geometry. Now obviously what I can also do is show all objects or maybe ghost objects. So obviously what I can do, I can move this manually here, right? So I can like go, okay, and then I can make it bigger here. But that's going to take me forever, and that's just a clunky way of doing it. So what's the easiest solution to this? The easiest solution to this is to do the bounds. Now I'm going to go back to the object level and into my cliff geometry, and I'm going to use my planar cliff geometry. And just after my out, I'm going to say bound. Okay. And you can see it gives me a bounding box around my geometry, and I can change in the lower padding and the upper padding as I see fit for my shot. Now I'm going to go in here and punch in some values. So 13.5 in the lower padding of X, 3.5 and 10.7 minus 12.4 and 14.4. I know these are very exact values, but this is what worked for this shot, and 74.7. Now I've got these values, so I've got this bound here. So if I reference my cliff geometry, you can see that it sits perfectly around my cliff. And this is exactly what we're going to be using in our flip tank, in our ocean source node. and I'm going to type null, and then I'm going to say out bounds. Okay, now how do I call that information from this null to my ocean source size and center? Very simple. I'm going to use a couple of expressions. So I'm going to click on this size X and press Ctrl E, and it's going to open up this expression window where I can type my expression easily. And I'm going to say bbox, which is the variable that we're going to use, and I'm going to call in this, like, so dot dot slash would give us this this level, and another dot dot slash would take us up a level, and I'm going to say let's say, so cliff geometry, so cliff geo, and out bounds, and I'm going to close it, and I'm going to say d underscore x size, and I'm going to do accept. And you can see that as soon as I do that, I have a value here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing but y, and exact same thing in the z. So now I have this ocean source tank with actual dimensions in the size parameter as our bounce up. Now we're going to use the same thing at the center, but with center it's a bit different. We're going to use a little bit different, the expression a bit differently. So we're going to say, instead of bbox, we're going to say centroid. So give me the centroid, and instead of size, it just needs d underscore x. So it's going to take the center point of the x and roll with it. Okay, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing in y and in z. Done. And there you go. We have our ocean source tank all procedurally set up. Now, the benefit of using it this way is, as you probably would have guessed, is if this layout geometry changes, let's say if this moves, I'm going to move it in X. Cool. The bounds would change with it. And let's see. Let's do a extreme change, shall we? There you go. So the bounds would actually change with it. So you wouldn't, so if the layout geometry moved, you wouldn't have to set up your bounds again, because it's all procedurally set up based on the actual geometry. Everything else would automatically update. So this is one of the biggest benefit of using Houdini in a procedural way, and you should, because if you don't, you might as well be using Maya, which is not very suitable for FX workflow. Okay, now let's take a look on how we can set up a simple .NET and set up our flip objects and our flip solvers.